Okay, maybe I will start. Right. Good morning for those from African region, and also good afternoon for those from Asia country. Today we are honored to actually have a very distinguished speaker, Professor Dr. Mohamad Tajuddin Mohamad Rasdi. He's actually the professor of architecture from UCSI University, and he actually published 56 books up to date in mostly in architecture, social, political, religion, and educational issues. I understand he was a columnist in Free Malaysia Today, Utusan Malaysia, Sinahalian, Borneo Post, and I think he's still writing in the Star, Pro. Yeah. So he actually have a very experience in writing on his area. He was receiving 4 National Book Awards, Civil Society Award, and National Unity Award from the national bodies, NGO, and also private educations. Professor also appointed by the Tun Dr. Mahathir as a member of the Committee for the Unity at the Ministry of Unity as well. And last year, 2023, he was appointed as a member of the Board of Governance for the University Kebangsaan Malaysia by the Ministry of Higher Education. The platform is ready for you.
Thank you very much, Hu. Hello, everyone. Thank you for sparing the time to listen to my talk. I'm most appreciative. In the Islamic tradition, it is the lecturer who has to thank the audience, not the other way around, because the sharing of knowledge is the responsibility of the ulama, or the scholars, and that the Wakaf Ilmu calls for the idea that any good coming from the lecturer to the audience, and if it is practiced, then this will become a legacy of knowledge that can be a blessing to the speaker, even though he is no longer in this world. And that is the intention about how knowledge is a very sacred affair, and knowledge is also something that needs to be used as a social agent rather than specifically for other purposes. Now, in today's talk, I will be talking about the mosque, but I will not be talking about the mosque in the manner of many of you have listened to with regard to the building per se. I'll be talking about the mosque in the context of Islam in the modern world, Islam in the global aspect, rather than the mosque within its narrow ritualistic as well as its traditional construct of a perception. Now, the message that I want to send into this talk is that the mosque at this present period, wherever you go, and you will see great big domes, great minarets, tall minarets. You can see the Masjid Putra, the Masjid Wilayah. Any kind of mosque will give you an immediate response of a huge building, which most of the time is not the same as the context of the area or the urban fabric that it is part of. Now, the reason for that is that the mosque feels itself to be different because it is so-called the symbol of Islam, because it is so-called the house of God, because it is the so-called the idea of sanctity. And that would then distinguish the mosque from the surrounding construct. Now, such a definition of architecture to me, as a professor of architecture, is problematic. Even though most architects would simply just do it without any thought, simply because there are precedent for it. Architects, in order to impress clients, you choose what you call the precedent method, what has been done before. Now, I would like to take you on a journey into what is Islam in terms of its position in society. How does Islam, the question that I asked is, how is Islam in relation to the modern construct of living or coexisting with all communities? What is the position of Islam in this sense? Now, if we can answer that very clearly, then I will tell you that the mosque that you see around you, even though it's great big ones, costing 400 million, this does not have the spirit of what I say to be the Islamic spirit of coexistence. Politically, such a statement may find um, enemies within the context of Islam or Muslims that has what is called the traditional mindset or the conservative mindset or a politically motivated mindset. However, if we were to look at what Anwar Ibrahim is doing with what he terms as the Madani construct of society, that becomes a bit more clearer because that is actually the essence of Islam, being part of civilization, not contrary to, not isolated from the rest of the world. It seems simple enough that a religion must be part and parcel of a global coexistence, but unfortunately, in this day and age of information, superhighway, and also the level of so-called education, people are still trapped into the idea of an identity construct which does not progress beyond what they are being told. So I will share my slides now. So the topic, the mosque between tradition and globalization, a socio-political critique, has this message or the problem that traditions of Islam is interpreted in a narrow construct by traditional scholars studying Islam as a single discipline. This happens in Malaysia. We have the institution of religion with the muftis heading the call. We also have the madrasa or the schools as well as universities holding the tradition of Islam in this context. Now, modernity and globalization calls for a larger and more meaningful and inclusive interpretation of Islam for mutual coexistence and mutual dignity of all mankind. This is an understanding or a concept that is alien to most Muslims, unfortunately. However, this is the thing that which I believe the Madani construct of Anwar Ibrahim, as well as much of the progressive thinking of certain NGOs with regard to how Islam can coexist or Muslim can coexist in an inclusive context, not just in a tolerant context. Now, that is the challenge here. And as I said, once this idea can be understood clearly, a lot of our political policies, our social interaction, our cultural understanding will become something that is more meaningful and progressive. But at the moment, because the tradition of Islam is being trapped in a conservative mode, then most Muslims are in the cocoon of their own existence. You can see the mosque that is created, isolated from all the entities with an alien language to its context. And I will bring to you a new definition of mosque from my discourse. So the mosque is caught in this dichotomy of institutions and the different perspective that we can have. Now, at the present time, the planning of the mosque represents what I call a sieged Islam, meaning it's like a fortress isolating itself from the urban fabric. And that is not an architectural intention, that is an architectural product. It's a product of the idea of how Muslims must interact. Muslims are seen to have to interact with the outer world. So the existence of some idea of sanctity, sacred spaces, which in reality doesn't exist in Islam. But here in the cultural construct, it becomes something of a very realistic aspect. In the political scenario, Islam is under siege by extremists, mainstream opportunists, and ignorant populists instructed by an outmoded religious education content. And this is what we have now. We have an outmoded religious education content that produces ignorant populace of their own religion, even though they seem to be very, very sensitive about religious issues and they seem to love their religion. But I will tell you, most Muslims do not understand their religion at all. What they understand simply is what is taught to them through tradition. But I have been taught through tradition, but I have also gotten out of the tradition and I have read the original sources and I have a completely different view than what has been presented. And with that, extremists and opportunists take note and build upon this so-called ignorant populace to the point of even having it at universities. They're still ignorant because this is where the problem of education comes from. The result is Islam is seen as exclusive, dogmatic, intolerant, and regressive against the backdrop of ideas on democracy, civil society, inclusivity, and the multi-religious nation state. So in my study of Islam, the idea of democracy, idea of civil society, inclusivity, and all this aspect of multi-religious coexistence is no problem in Islam. In fact, it is supposed to encourage it. But what happened is that the problem of education and the problem of the politics of institution and also the politics of nation has made it exclusive, dogmatic, intolerant, and regressive. Now, the architects who have clients within this society will produce buildings that I will describe as being very, very isolated. Now, in politics, we have such things happening even just a few years ago, where you can see the institution of the Mufti branding a political party, which is what we call a political party that has no record of extremism, no record of people trying to be traitors, no record at all. But then have been labeled as a kafir harbi, which is a very, very serious accusation. And this has happened from an institution which is the Mufti, and that I consider being a very serious. And that's why the society has become very divided. The Muslims and non-Muslim are divided in this country. And then you could see how the mosque is being praised. So we have the laundry issue where Muslim laundromat disallowed any non-Muslim to use because the idea that non-Muslims are dirty and therefore should not fit into the mix with the clothes or the machine that has the clothes of Muslim. Now, this is a very dangerous understanding, and luckily the Sultan has stepped in to advise the religious teachers. And the one that you see here is actually part of the government teacher. This is several years ago before the new government, to say that others are unclean. And this kind of concept is, to me, as I said, a devastating blow to nation building. And this is what we are grappling with. Now, for me, mosque must be designed within the idea of Islam that is inclusive, an Islam that is progressive, an Islam that is dynamic, an Islam that is tolerant, an Islam that is friendly within the context of each community location. All these words that I have mentioned, even though it may mean socially or politically, can be interpreted within the architectural context. This is what architects do. The problem here is that architects themselves either do not know all these things, because they are stuck within a building to building relationship, meaning what was the building before? I don't look at building. I look at the concept of society. And so when I devise any architectural work, the framework that I use would always be social, political, spiritual, religious, not object-centered to precedents. So a socio-political critique of mosque design is necessary to reinvent the typology. How do you reinvent the typology to make it more friendly, to make it more inclusive? You require a socio-political critique. It's not that I want to talk politics, but if I just remain talking about the mosque, we'll go nowhere. We'll go nowhere because then you'll be talking about an object. Okay, so here is the problem of a lot of things in our country, whether we're talking about education or politics or society. We're stuck with objects. Objects meaning the objectification of values, the objectification of politics, the objectification of society. Symbols and forms become the main argument point, not the essence of compassion, understanding, and this is something which we need to work at. My guiding verse of the Quran has always been this verse, which is in the Surah Al-Baqarah, the second Surah, verse 177. From this verse, I can build a whole city. And this is the problem. When you build cities based on precedent, you build mosques based on precedent, but not looking at what the essence of the religion is. If you were to look at I can talk hours and hours on this single verse alone, but I just want to show that true piety does not consist of turning your faces toward the east or west, but truly pious is one who believes in God, last day, and then is so on to show that and spend his subsistence, however he himself may cherish it, upon his next of kin, the orphans and the needy and the wayfarer and the beggars, and the freeing of human beings from bondage. So with that aspect of helping the orphans and the poor and the needy and the wayfarer, this is the single most important aspect of social justice as well as spiritual justice, where you will see that how do you transfer this into what is called built form and also city planning. It has been done before. The caravanserais of old, people can just go there and stay for free. The madrasa, the mosque even have places for the homeless to stay. But such things now disappear because what takes apart is the symbol of the greatness of Islam. So the big mosque, the big dome, these are all not mentioned in the essence of Islam. This is not mentioned. God did not ask you to raise a building or any symbol to make sure that people remember him. God asked you to do this to your fellow human beings. It doesn't say that you are to help orphans who are Muslim. It all orphans. This is something which has escaped many Muslims. So sometimes when they are welfare program, it is only limited to a certain faith group. The Prophet Muhammad have actually made a statement that all the earth is a place of prayer for my servant or my for those who worship or perform the prayers. So what does that mean? Now, this is a significant verse. This means, ladies and gentlemen, that the mosque is a facility and it is not a temple. There is only one temple which is sacred in Islam, and that is the Masjid al-Haram, because there are hadiths that says that this is a sacred place. The Prophet also said the Masjid al-Aqsa is also a sacred place or a sacred spot, and also said something about the mosque of the Prophet or the house which he lived in that became a mosque was also a blessed place. Only these three things. Other places, whether it costs 400 million ringgit in Putrajaya or costs 400,000 ringgit in Taman Saujana, they are all facilities. Now, many Muslims will disagree with me, because they will quote hadith or whatever and say that, look, this is not right. The mosque is a sacred place. Well, I say a very simple thing. In Australia, they used to perform prayers in certain convention halls, certain multi-purpose halls, and sometimes it moved from one place to another. So a Muslim is allowed to pray as long as the place is clean. And so if you are praying in the office at UCSI, that is also permitted. If you are praying on a clean parking lot, that is also permitted. So if you can pray in all those things, then what is the signal with regard to the mosque? It is a facility. So in the first part of this talk, there are 4 parts. I just want to run through an overview about the shape of the mosque that has been there in the Nusantara or the Malay world. Okay, I'm not touching on on the world as such, but only in the Malay world. So in the Malay world, we have this timber mosque, whose characteristic is that it is raised or on pilotis or on stilts, or what we call the kolom. And then it has this tiered roof. Most of the time it's 3 tiers. Sometimes, like in the Kampung Tuan, it has 4 tiers. Now, the question here is, why is the mosque shaped like that? The Malay house is not shaped like that. The Malay house always have a long roof, we call the gable roof. It never has a pyramidal roof, never. So why is this mosque like that? There are theories, but there are no answers. Some people theorize that it's following some kind of pagoda-like building or an ancient building. But that is not a very popular theory, because Muslims do not like to associate with non-Muslim examples. Then there is also the theory, like what I am proposing, that if you have a square room, then you need to have ventilation and light. So I call it the constructional pragmatic theory. Others believe that it is a meaning of the extension of spirituality of a person. Well, that's stretching it, but that it has been put out, but there is no, of course, no evidence whatsoever. Another theory yet says that because the mosque has some sort of central column, so it is emulating the domes, where the domes need a central column. So it is part of this central mosque idea of a columned roof. But because in this area we don't do columns, because we have a lot of timber, so the timber pyramid then takes precedent. So you can see here, many of the mosques having this kind of typology. And certainly, as I said, one of the things is that it's different. Okay, so the mosque is different than the house, than the palace is different, because it has its own identity. Okay, so in some mosques, there is a long roof, or what we call the gable roof, but it's not that many. Most of the time, it is pyramidal roof. And those are the timber mosques. These are some of the mosques in Indonesia, and the theory is that the mosques in Malaysia follow the tradition in Indonesia. The tradition of Indonesia perhaps follow some other temple-like structures, but has not been proven which one. And so this is the typology that we have. And the summary here is that the question here is, why is it square, and why must it be in a pyramidal roof? It has never been answered, because in Islam, if you were to pray in a rectangular space, that is also okay, because the prayer comes with the rows of people worshiping. One of my favorite typology is this mosque in Malacca. This is the Kampung Hulu Mosque. The Kampung Hulu Mosque also have a tiered roof, but you can see the characteristic similarity of it and the Chinese temple, with this rich roof and curved decoration, and the mastaka, or the crown of the roof, all very, 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 very Chinese. And it is believed that Chinese craftsmen had built some of these mosques in Malacca, because Malacca was the melting pot of many cultures, many languages, and many faiths. One of the interesting thing here is the Rumah Taboh, or the Taboh house, which is above the gateway. And this is actually the characteristic way of calling for prayers, where there is a drum and that you beat the drum, which is either what you call a taboh, or we call it in another name if it is timba. Okay, this one is a drum of stretched animal skin. So the mosque topology here, it doesn't have the pilotis or the column, but it is on the ground, and it is again, as I said, three-tiered with a central column layout. So you can see very clearly the decoration. I've just read a PhD on this subject, and they discovered Chinese handwriting in this mosque to show the multiplicity of cultures involved within this kind of structure. So here is a situation of the mosque actually being part and parcel of the scale and even language of the urban fabric, and it shows it to be part of the community. Now, when we come slightly into the modern times, we see this kind of mosque. What is it? Well, these are mosques built using the language of Indian Mughal architecture. All right. The colonizers or the colonialists of Malaysia is the British. So British have their empire in India, and many of the buildings like the Fateh Post Sikri and the Red Fort all have the characteristic arches, characteristic onion domes, characteristic spires, characteristics pinnacles, and all these different kinds of ornamentation that became the language of choice for the British to actually show to the Sultan or to the kings of Malaysia or Malaya, to the Raja and the Sultan, that this is a kind of a royal language, a language that is of kings in sultans in Mughal, and then transferred here into the Malay idea of power, okay, power architecture. Now, with those kinds of architecture, we can see that they are starting to be different than the urban fabric because of its symbolism and its meaning. And so the mosque is, to me, more of a temple rather than a community center. Why? Because there's only a function of prayer and a function of performing rituals and nothing else. We see here also the Sultan Abu Bakar Mosque with there are only two classical architecture or neoclassical architecture of the mosque, the Pasir Pelangi Mosque and the Sultan Abu Bakar Mosque. I didn't discover anything else that have this language. With aspect of the vernacular, modern vernacular, built of concrete, and so you can have this kind of language, which is basically a cut pattern, rather than something that is already part and parcel, like the arches, which is fully integrated. Here is just more of a facial decoration to have the idea of the mosque. Some of the interesting things that happen in the modern period is the definition of mosque in the Indonesian scenario. We see the mosque going away from the dome imagery, and then it is embracing a totally new language, which is the functional, pragmatic, and also we call the language of purity in terms of this form not coming directly from history. So the idea of not following history has found favors among modern architects in Indonesia. And this actually, again, some of them may contrast with the surrounding, but some of them, like with the proper scale, would be in context with the surrounding. So those are the others. And we come to the late modern and coming to what we call the postmodern architecture. We have various forms. And if you look at the Masjid Negara, one of the most important buildings in Asia or in the world with regard to mosque architecture, there is no precedent like Masjid Negara, where we can see the generous Serambi area, which is the largest in anywhere. With the folded shape roof in the center. And we see some other ways of integrating structure and the form of what is believed to be a symbol of Islam, like the Seramban State Mosque, which is the conoid. The conoid is a structural element, which is a shell structure. It works almost similarly with the folded plate. The folded plate is not just an umbrella, but it is also a structural system. So it's a folded plate system. Now, it's the postmodern era. Postmodern means you can now look to the past, and therefore the architects began to read the past, coming out with all these forms and the jumble and eclectic aspect of the architecture of Iran, architecture of Egypt, architecture of Turkey, to make it into a mesh of identity that Islam is this kind of empire building, where many of these great mosques in this manner was produced during the time of the Mahathir era. Mahathir loved the idea of Islam as an empire building entity rather than its values of compassion, values of tolerance. He doesn't like that. What he likes is that Islam was a military power, economic power, political power, and that during the time, the mosques were built in this grand manner. And so he adopted lock, stock, and barrel and transferred them to Malaysia. Why? To make his image better. So this mosque is to make Mahathir look good, that Mahathir is someone who loves Islam, that UMNO is also a party that is empire building for Muslim. And that is the way politics work, ladies and gentlemen, because politics need you to have a perception. If you are perceived to be weak, then you will lose support. If you are perceived to be strong, then you gain more support. So this is the way of politics. Other kinds of mosques is considered what we call regionalism, where the typology takes on the buildings other than mosques, meaning the houses and other buildings become a kind of inspiration for the architects to experiment with different form that uses the present material of the country. So the mosque is always something that is quite isolated from the urban context. And we can see that it has many different kind of languages. So to show that Islam can actually take on many different value languages. So it's not just a single language. So that is something that we need to understand. Now, when we look at this second part, we look at the question of how does this mosque how are they read within the construct of global politics, globalization, and also a modern society? How do they affect? So I have interpreted that the Masjid Negara is the most important one that symbolizes our globalization effort, our idea of coexistence in the world, and is exemplified that. But unfortunately, during the Mahathir era, they produced mosques like this, which is again an empire building language. as well as a mosque that is isolated, meaning you can see the fence, you can see the moat or uh, the the external pool, which looks like a castle moat, and that becomes the the language of unfriendliness, language of over sanctification to the mosque. Now, for the Masjid Negara, I have described it as dynamic, universal, inclusive, tropical, and humble. What does dynamic mean? It means that you are able to think beyond, you are able to change beyond your original form. And certainly the Masjid Negara did not follow any architectural form of the past, whether it is the Masjid Kampung Tuan or the other masjid with a lot of domes and also arches and things like that. So universalism means that there's no ethnocentric language, like it's a bit more Malay or it's a bit more from another country. It is inclusive because there are no fence or gateways. It's tropical. You can see the way that the building can breathe. And it is humble, as you can see that the lines, horizontal lines of the building that keeps the building on the ground, and the broken up Serambi frees itself from the formalistic language of authority. Here is fully dogmatic, meaning it cannot change. It hasn't changed. The shape of the mosque is following the Hagia Sophia. And why should you do that? But according to Mahathir, it is about associating power with power, UMNO's power with the Turkish power. The Middle Eastern centric means the language is not from the Nusantara. Exclusive, you can see the moat, the fence, all of them speak of the idea that you are not welcome. How can that be? Mosque is a public place for Muslim. Any Muslim can go into any mosque. Supposed to be any non-Muslim also can go to any mosque, but that becomes a contentious issue. So that is the idea of the mosque in the present time. How do you read it? It is a population of Malay Muslims that are uncomfortable with non-Muslim citizens. This is no trust. There is mutual hatred. And this has been taught to them through their social spheres and reinforced by political leaders who want a populist mandate. Now, part 3 is the challenges of architecture contextualism. We use the term contextualism to mean a building in a city or anywhere that is not a rival, that is fitting in well. Sorry, that means the building fits well. You cannot just put up any building because you need to show whether that it is the same as the rest of the town or the urban fabric, and also the scale of it should also be like that. And I'll explain to that in the examples of the mosque work. So the Muslim and non-Muslim political divide is heightened because of this isolationist attitude of Muslim. When you build a mosque like the Masjid Damansara, who's going to go there? Muslims erroneously believe that the populist language of those minarets as a kind of secret art form. For me, there's no such thing as a secret art. But for most Muslims who do not understand the religion, what they do is to actually associate with supernatural things, like the magical aspect of Islam or the miracle aspect, and this is something unfortunate. Now, with regard to the idea of contextualism, if you look at this mosque in the United States, the people or the committee members specifically mentioned that they want to be part of the American society. But then the question is, why are they following 17th century style Turkish architecture? This is definitely Turkish architecture. When the context of the place, which is Maryland, is like, as you can see in some of the pictures, why the direct contrast? this is where many Muslims believe that Islam should not be part of the general society, which then gives rise to Donald Trump and many other people saying that Muslims do not care about the host society, and they just want to be by themselves, with themselves, isolated from others. Now that is the political narrative, and I don't like Donald Trump, but I cannot not agree with him when he reads the idea that immigrants do not want to share with the whole society certain socio-cultural aspect. Of course, not supposed to go and drink alcohol or wear revealing clothes and things like that. But certainly other places you can be part of. You can celebrate anything if it doesn't really go against what is called the main concept of religion. It's quite harmless. So Islam is very, very open, very, very what we call flexible in many, many regard. Only those who do not know their religion seems to think that Islam is very, very narrow and restricted. For instance, the decision of the Johor region to change weekends has taken on flack from people who say this is un-Islamic and all that. And I have a video YouTube to say that Islam doesn't have a holy day. Islam only has Friday prayers for just 2 hours. And after that, you're going to have to go back to work. So the concept of the Sabbath or the rest day of Sunday from the Christian and the Jewish Sabbath does not exist in Islam. So here is the problem of a conservative interpretation or even an ignorant interpretation as opposed to one that is a learned interpretation. Now, in the Islamic Center of Washington, D.C., I always wonder why is the language used is what we call an Egyptian kind of Muslim architecture. Why can't the language follow the classical language of the state capitol house? Because this is Washington, D.C., and it originated in the 18th century, and they were looking at Greek classicism, Greek revivalism, and these are the intention of the architect. And later on, the idea of classicism or classical architecture is the main architecture of this state or the town, the city. So the architects were to design in the city, it needs to be also what we call in context. But the mosque clearly is not in context. If you were to ask why the mosque is not in context, then the Muslim will say, well, we are Muslim, we are different. And even there are some ustaz or the cleric will say, you cannot follow the ways of the kafir people. You cannot follow the ways of the government, the way they wear, the way they do things, and things like that. Well, to them, I would say, how come you don't criticize this building in Johor? The Sultan Abu Bakar Mosque is clearly a classical building. This building would fit well in Washington, D.C. Okay, under the rule of what we call contextual architecture. And Islam has no problem using any kind of language where Muslims are residing and having their own mosque. Now, one of my students having a PhD study on the Isfahan Bazaar, we take a look at the mosque in relation to the bazaar. We look at the mosque is in context with the urban fabric. It is not overpowering. It is part and parcel. You can see even a small, a certain side of the dome and even the minaret, and you can access directly. And all these are integrated within the urban fabric. So that is something that comes closer to the spirit of Islam, where worship and work is not separated. Some people say, no, worship must be you worshiping God. No, it doesn't work like that. Even in the verse of the Quran on Friday prayers, when you hear the call of prayer, stop your work and go and prepare yourself for prayer. But after the prayer is over, then you should go back to work. So this is perfectly in line with the idea of contextualism of modern cities. And, and this is what Isfahan is all about. So when the London Mosque was going to be built, they were going to build something like the Washington DC Mosque, something that is very so-called identifiably Muslim. But then the non-Muslim authorities say that, well, you shouldn't do that because this is London. Okay, London is a heritage town, and there are buildings that are not that big, so you need to be aware of the scale, the language that you are using, and so that's why the architect had to be very what we call not too adventurous with using Egyptian architecture or a Turkish architecture. You can see that it's more Platonic in terms of its form and in line with the idea of a modern language or fabric of the city. The Singapore mosque also follows the context of the towns and the cities in terms of its language. It does not carry the traditional mode. These are examples of globalization that has occurred, and Islam being part of it. So these are the hadith that I said with regard to, there's only three uh, sacred mosque. Why I'm bringing this argument is that a lot of people are trying to say mosque is a special place, and therefore it justifies the expenses. You know, so much money being spent, so unique a form, always wanting to find something unique, and unique forms are usually very expensive. These are not within the context of the Islamic value system. Okay, so the Islamic value system, even in what we call political Islam, is only about justice, freedom of conscience, freedom of expression, good governance, separation of power, rule of law. All those that are accepted in the Western world is part and parcel of what we call Islamic values in governance. And so we don't need to be different. Okay, and that is the message that I have here. And in some of the hadith of scripture, the Prophet himself had advised against to build mosques like the Putra Mosque or the Masjid Wilayah. See, you're building grand mosques, what for? You know, not many people are going to be praying in them. So now many of these places just become tourist spots. And for me, that doesn't actually contain the spirit of Islam. And that's why I said many mosques are built, but not many have what I call the Islamic spirit or the Islamic values. Most of them are practicing values that are un-Islamic, like wasting money on building minarets. Why do you want to build a minaret? You don't really need to call the azan, and even if you did call the azan, you can call it in the background. Most other people already have a watch because the azan existed for the calling of people at one single time because there was no watch. So when we can have that already, you don't really need to call the azan. And furthermore, if you were to call the azan, you don't need the minaret. You don't really need the minaret at all. And so why then you have 4 minarets, sometimes 6 minaret, and sometimes 2 minarets? All these are wasteful things which the Prophet Muhammad was very, very seriously against. He doesn't like to waste on building. And if you have any money, you need to help the poor, as mentioned in the Surah Baqarah. Coming to the last part of my talk, Muslims must rethink their social and communal agenda, emphasizing activities that invite and engage the larger community. This is what I dream of and what I hope for. That the mosque has not only activities for Muslim but also for non-Muslim, in the sense that not trying to make them become Muslim. When I was in the United States, we have this outreach program, invite people to come in. They can ask questions about the mosque, about Islam and anything. And if they ask questions about how we pray and things like that, we will explain. So this is our what we call outreach program. In Melbourne, they have some lectures, let's say, that are common. It's about health, about security, about wellness. That is also part and parcel of the larger community, and other people will come wearing whatever they want to wear. They don't have to, like in the Masjid Negara, having to put on all these things. It doesn't happen. When I was in the United States and also in Edinburgh, Scotland, we don't require people to wear all this attire for you to come in. So the new architecture of the mosque must have a language that conforms to the urban fabric rather than be isolated from it, in order to show that Islam is part and parcel of the modern community. And this is where we will see the idea where social inclusivism is important. And in this hadith, God had said that I was hungry and you did not feed me. And when the son of Adam said, how do we feed you? He said, if you had come to help the poor, then you will find me with it. So this is the kind of Islam. The verse of the Quran and this hadith represent the two fundamental idea of social Islam, political Islam. However, in our present state, the political Islam is always about insulting Allah, insulting the Prophet, and having to make halal and haram a big issue. This is the issue. This should be the issue. And with this issue, you can build a different kind of mosque. And that is why buildings of the mosque become very big, very obtrusive and obvious and all that, because it's exuberant, because it's using a very weak idea of symbolism, and that is politically strong, but then it is weak in the sense of what the Prophet was saying about society, community, and also the idea of developing man and society in the right way. So being part of a larger community, the Prophet said that you must not break yourself from the community. This is again should be part and parcel of the mosque consideration, but certainly it is not now. Multiculturalism and community responsibility. There was a hadith in which the Prophet was sitting down, and then suddenly somebody was carrying the dead body to be buried, and the Prophet gave respect by standing up. People say that is a Jew. The dead body is a Jew. Why are you standing up? It's okay. I mean, doesn't he have a soul? So the Prophet Muhammad gave respect to other people, other faith. And there are many hadiths in which he gave respect to them, which more than I can say to many Muslims who seem to claim that you only show respect to Muslims and not to other people. And that is the reason why, as I said again, the mosque is always different than the urban fabric. So these are social or political hadiths in which how do you look at the Muslim community? Now, when you look at the actions of some of the social influencers or the politicians nowadays, you will not see the Islam that is contained in the hadith that I brought. You'll never see that, because they are practicing a cultural Islam, a made-up Islam, and not the Islam of the Prophet. As you are a good Muslim, you must follow the Prophet, not the Malays. In this case, the Malays in this country. And in other cases, perhaps the Arabs or other people. You must always have the Prophet Muhammad as your beacon of guidance, rather than your ustaz and all that. You can listen to the ustaz, but you cannot stay with them and watch them specifically as an example for you. So mosques, like in the United States, they tend to make it like a community center because that is required. You cannot have something that is different. When the committee members said they were building a mosque that is exclusive only to Islam, it was not allowed. Any community center must have inclusiveness, meaning other people should be able to come in. And this is what should happen to all of our houses of worship, not just the mosque. All our houses of worship, whether they are temples, gurdwara, and churches, as well as mosques, must have common spaces for us to come in and interact. But of course, like the conservative Muslims, they will say, "Oh no, these people are dirty. These people are kafir. They cannot come to the mosque." This is all ridiculous. I can quote many hadiths where the Prophet's house and his mosque was visited by non-Muslims, and so this is something that originally the spirit of the community and society in Islam in the past has changed to the present context of mutual mistrust, and therefore the mosque has been designed in that manner. An example of mutual of mistrust is when a surau or a mosque in Penang opened up its doors to non-Muslim during the flood, flash flood in Penang, and the person who had done it, which was a mosque, a Bilal, we call it, was criticized heavily by the social media. And these people who are social media obviously do not know what Islam is, because Islam is compassion. Islam is about helping people, and the mosque is only a backdrop, has nothing to do with the sanctity and things like that. They don't know because they are busy playing around with symbols rather than the essence of the religion. The Bangsa Mosque, or the Abu Bakar Mosque, has a celebration of the Chinese New Year, and this is a good example how we want the mosque to be in a global society, rather in a restricted traditional society. In the traditional society of all is fine because they have a single homogeneous society. But here in the global construct, in the modern city construct, it is a cosmopolitan of many cultures, many faiths, many different people. So we have all these examples. Sometimes it's just for the camera or optical, what we call the proper political optics. But if it happens, then it is good. I would like to record them. And in order to show to the muftis, there was an incident quite recently where the Perak religious department did a very good thing, where it required all their officers, which are their religious officers, religious in charge of religion, visit different places of worship. But then there was someone in social media made an issue of it and said, this is why are Muslims visiting other places of worship? And the Mufti of Terengganu had to say something like, you can only go to another place of worship if you have an intention of converting people, which is a very wrong thing to say politically. And I totally disagree with the Mufti, and I don't think that is a proper thing to have been said. Finally, just to show a few examples of this unusual mosque. One is created by certain architects, others are my students' work that you will not see much around, in which you see here in the Melbourne Newport Mosque. I have been to this mosque. There is no minaret, and the minaret is transferred into this kind of a trapezoid wall because it doesn't want to interrupt the whole fabric to show that it is different than the other buildings in the neighborhood. And there is no fence, and you can actually walk up, you can see people pray, and then it's a very, very inclusive thing. Now, there is a concern with the Christchurch incident where a gunman came into the mosque and then shot and killed 30 over Muslim. Here is a question of security, but then you also want openness. This becomes what I call an architectural challenge. How do you make the mosque look open, and yet it has some security features to prevent such massacres from happening? I don't think it's a difficult problem to deal with. It's simply a matter of design solution. Now, for my PhD, I had to look at what the mosque is in terms of its socio-political context. And the mosque is actually a community center, a gathering place to strengthen brotherhood between Muslim, but it's also a resource place for many people, children wanting to study and going to a library, and other people wanting to have some things, a lot of things that can be done in the mosque rather than what is seen here in the terms of this restriction. So that is the idea of the mosque being a part and parcel of the community and serving the larger society rather than its own specific place. So the blueprint that I have is this curriculum, what I call the mosque curriculum, okay, that it has to have all this aspect. Now the curriculum is simply just about religious activities. It does not look at the larger context of community building. And I would like one day perhaps to sit down with Jakim, Ministry of Religion and Ministry of Unity, to actually propose all houses of worship having this community development program for children, for adults, for anybody, so that we can go into different houses of worship, maybe to have coffee, maybe to just rest, maybe to just come and interact, maybe to bring our children to play in the playground. This is the vision that I have for our country and also for the world. If we can do that, then we will edge out this opportunists, politicians, and social media influencers to make us enemies of one another purportedly for the sake of religion. Some people believe for the sake of religion, we must make enemies. If we don't make enemies, then God will not love us. This is the kind of thinking and narrative that exists in the present time. So we see here some of my students doing some of the work. This is an example of a mosque which has a whole 1/3 of the site devoted purely to women. So it is a women-friendly mosque. And you look at the other part, that the mosque is not monumental. It is broken up into pieces of different functions for the community. It doesn't have the fence, and people can come in and also use the place. And this becomes part of the larger community context. Here is the mosque that has a bazaar, and right in the middle of the site. The big box here is the prayer space. And when the prayer is on, then the work has to stop. But then people can still come in anywhere they want and also buy things after the prayers. And this become part of the larger community context. Now, in conclusion, Muslims in mosques must engage other communities in order to embrace the larger Islamic spirituality. Now, this calls for actually this Madani concept. I'm not saying this because I'm trying to be a spokesperson for Anwar Ibrahim. I have believed in this kind of Islam for a long time. And I think Dato' Sri Anwar Ibrahim is a Muslim after my own heart because both of us share this vision of Islam being part of the global society. Unfortunately, most Muslims do not see it like that because they are stuck in the traditional mode. But I'm happy to see that there are news about mosques in Sabah and Sarawak that are more inclusive. Abang Johari was mentioning that during there is a mosque and a church in a place, one of the cities in Sarawak, where during Sunday, the mosque will open its door for people to park because there is overload of parking for the church. And on Friday, the church will open its doors for parking for the mosque when there is an overflow of traffic to the mosque. This is the kind of thing that we have. The Abu Bakar Mosque, they have the toilet open to people to come in, which is part of the compound. And also they have a place for poor people to come in and get food. I asked whether there are, because they don't record who comes in to get food. I think some people, if they have money, they would just buy, let's say, a sack of rice, and then they would put into the place. It doesn't matter who comes in and to take it, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslim. My idea is to have homeless people be part of the houses of worship. I think something is wrong when you have 1,500 homeless people with children and then you have 200 houses of worship in the middle of Kuala Lumpur. If you have homeless and you have big mosques or big houses of worship, something is not right. And the thing that is not right is religion. Okay, and that is always that. When I jury a house of worship or jury a mosque design, that is the first thing that we'll ask. Where is the place for the homeless? And most of the time, it is not there. So the plans must accommodate the engagement of communities, and the mosque should not be made something like a sacred icon. And if we can do that, the mosque then will become an agent of socio-political inclusiveness rather than divide. What it is now is a division between Muslims and non-Muslim. So that is what I hope to have in the idea that globalization, modernization, and the idea of Islam being a progressive religion, Islam being part of a global community, Islam being inclusive rather than exclusive, that then sets up the stage for the new ideas of mosque in the future. With that, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Prof, for the sharing. Now we are open for question Q&A. If you have any questions, you can just unmute yourself, and then if you don't mind, just open your webcam so we can know who are you. Is there any questions from the platform? Bro, maybe they need a bit of time to think about it. Maybe I will start with my one questions. I sometimes do have people asking me like, because I'm Christian, and they should say like this thing you shouldn't do, this thing you can do, you cannot do. I think to me is we have to differentiate between the culture and religion. What do you think about that?
Okay, thank you very much. That is the gist of the problem. When you are learning what we call religion, okay, first of all, religion is the word created by man. When Jesus was walking the earth, Muhammad was walking the earth, and no such thing as the word religion. Okay, it's simply just an understanding of how things work in society and in the realm of what we call the invisible, because there are invisible things like the future is invisible. A lot of things are invisible, so they require some kind of faith. So when you are taught about what is wrong, what is right, what is halal, what is haram, this is what I call children teaching of children, meaning it is a beginner and you can follow it. But as you grow older and you encounter life, those things of do's and don'ts in many sense becomes gray area, and that is what it's supposed to do. Is you're not losing your faith, you're gaining more confidence in your faith. And I have spoken in churches, I've spoken in temples, and people accuse me of being what we call sesat. This is not right. I am more confident of my faith, and I have no problem sharing it with others. I have no problem respecting others' faith, and that again shows the confidence, rather than the idea that then you will compromise and all these things. So spirituality and religion are two different things. It's supposed to be spirituality is part of religion. However, now religion is more of a political identity, a cultural identity, and also what we call a construct that is meant to be different. And what I understand from the basic understanding of all religion, it is about how you relate to each other, to man. Many people think religion is relating to God. I've searched that and I found that you have to relate to man. What do you mean relate to man? How do you treat this person, which is of a different race? Even race is being invented by people. Okay. Also, faith is also invented in the sense that it divides us, and so you need to go beyond that, and that's where when you learn about others, then you cannot name something. one of my mentor, spiritual teacher, Eckhart Tolle, says, when you name a thing, you think you know, but actually you don't know. So naming a thing is part and parcel of the academic process, like naming a Malay, naming a Chinese, naming a Malaysia, naming a political NGO. So you name things. Once you name things, you restrict them, okay, to some sort of a model. And that restriction becomes problematic when you want to deal with another name that somehow does not fit. When in its original aspect, it doesn't have any name. And so you need to transcend yourself beyond the names in order to come to a higher spirituality.
I have a question.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Prof, for the well-researched topic. Honestly, I have no regret that I joined this. But I just want to ask this because in listening to all your conversation, talking about
Oh, we lost you.
a lot to people.
I'm not getting any audio, so I don't understand. I don't. Maybe you can type the.
Yeah, sorry. I think I have a technical glitch. I think that's it sorted.
You
Yeah.
can type a little bit.
Yeah,
On
can you
the.
hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. But you can try again.
All right. I said thank you for your well-researched presentation talking about culture, religion, and modernization. And I know it's what you're trying to let us know in that in modern day times, we have to be tolerant, inclusive, and ensure that we care for our community. You know, we should not just focus on spirituality in the name of a structure where we used to. But I've not seen you mention anything about Africa, but I just want to chip this in that in modern day, in our own environment, places of worship are sacred places, but what the religious organization or religious leaders usually do is to create a community where you have every other facilities that you have mentioned, but there must be a sacred place for worship so that that sacred place of worship will not be will not become dirty or will not become not available when you actually needed to use it. You know, and in most design nowadays, if you see a particular church or mosque being designed, you see some other ancillary facilities. Residential areas are being developed around a community ground nowadays. Sporting facilities, things like that, are being included. It has to do with modernization, but I just needed to shed more light as regards how this your recent research on modernization will be accepted by people across community that are already used to the traditional ways. What is the best approach, you know, to further educate people the more on why our cultural or traditional knowledge that we have, you know, can be merged with modernization? What are the best approach that it will not lead to crisis or war?
Thank you very much. Yes, one of the approaches that I was thinking of doing in my younger days, but now perhaps is no longer possible because of my age, was to actually travel around the world to places that are non-Muslim and to collect evidences of how mosques exist in a minority, how Muslims exist in the minority context, like say in the UK, in Europe, in the United States, because I was in the United States for 6 years and in Scotland for 3 years. So I understand, or I know a lot about the activities of the mosque in those countries. So what is not in existence is the documentation of the, let's say, the mosque in the United States. or which are the most active ones, and how are they used with regard to non-Muslims coming into the mosque, in which part of the mosque, and what are the activities. If we can have this database, then it can become a book or a video that it can be used to educate most Muslims. Because in Malaysia, if you want to do the change, it's very difficult because when people do not know that it can be used that way, then they will be reluctant to change. So one of the most important study that needs to be done is this one. And now I am spearheading a study about houses of worship, not just the mosque, houses of worship, and how what are the things that activities and spaces that are used in order to allow other faith also to come in to use. Like you have a gathering for wedding, you have a lecture that is universal, you have like the pandemic, you have the inoculation of vaccination. All these kind of things must be recorded in order to give to the future generation of different faiths to show that, look, that we come together as a community, and we are larger than that. If we don't do that, then the politician and opportunists can actually divide us, because we are already divided. People don't want to go to this temple or to this mosque because that is how it is. I discovered that also in Kelantan. I was told that sometimes the Muslim go to the temple and look for the Buddhist monk to ask for some sort of talisman. Of course, I'm not recommending that, but they have no problem going in and out of Buddhist temples. But when I give lectures in Buddhist temples, social media will light up saying Prof. Tajuddin is, away from Islam and things like that. So that's where we need a lot of examples of inclusive activities in the houses of worship, not just the mosque.
Sorry, I was just a bit of technical issue just now. Is there any more questions from the platforms? No? Hey, maybe I have the last questions. Bro, can I say that a lot of people actually using those kind of iconic buildings as to showcase their power? What you
Oh,
what your
yes, yes.
comment? Yeah.
Well, of course, if you look at history, houses of worship like the cathedrals, temples, and mosques are all symbols of power. They are the worst in the sense of spirituality, because they are not there for spirituality. They are simply for power's sake. Now, we must distinguish. For instance, if you build a big house of worship like a mosque in the past, now in the past, it is political power for two reasons. Number one, the more people you can gather under one roof, the more political point you can drive across in your sermon. Okay, so the sermon serves a political. Nowadays, you use the handphone, because communication is like we're having this communication. I'm alone in my house, okay, but I can talk to hundreds of thousands of people if I want to. But in those days, only if you build a big building, and then you have that. So one of the way to control political, so the cathedral and the mosque, they all have big buildings, big spaces for people to come in, and therefore that is about communication. The other is to communicate the grandness of the thing, the kingdom of heaven. The church is the gateway to heaven, because it has all these great big cathedral, and the mosque also has all these huge spaces and wondrous domes and feats of structures, and glory in all the golden decoration and things like that. So this is not for the love of God. It is for the love of man, and that is the truth of the matter. Now, if you were to look at the churches designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, it's very, very down to earth. If you go in, I have never been in, but I could see the spirituality. What is the spirituality? The spirituality here is that when you come in, you can sense nature. Okay, first thing is nature, meaning the trees around. You could actually see it. But if you go to the mosque or whatever that which is big, you can't even see the trees. Okay, the tree is taken out, right? So man is getting, which is the creation of God. The tree and nature is the creation of God. And Frank Lloyd Wright said, nature is the only body of God you will ever see. But here, the body of man, which is the building. And you can see that in its magnificence if you go to Putrajaya. And that is, for me, an antithesis to what spirituality is. Another spiritual aspect is the scale. I believe in smaller houses of worship rather than big ones. Why? Because the purpose is for brotherhood. Brotherhood means you want to know each other, not to just go pray and come home. That's not the purpose. The purpose is brotherhood. And so, right, Frank Lloyd Wright also said the same thing when he said that the church that he built, the Unity Church, is a house of community rather than so-called house of God, because the house of God in the European tradition is this big, massive buildings. So those are the humility of the church. It is more community centered rather than all these other ideas of grandness. I think that the conclusion here is that huge mosques tend to be not spiritually centered; it's more politically centered.
And thank you, Pro. I think just I think there's a message. There's a message from Mercy. Mercy actually is our chair for the Commission 10. She said thanks to Pro for this well-researched work and for the sharing with us from the Commission 10 chair. All right. With that, I should end for today's webinar. Thanks, Pro, for the sharing.
Thank you,
Before
everyone.
that, yeah, before that, I would like to ask all the participants, can you just switch on your webcam so we can actually just kind of take a good photo? Hi, Sui. Sui will be from Malaysia. Sui is land surveyor, if I'm not mistaken. Teres, do you like to switch on your webcam so I can just snap a photo? Okay, one more. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for your
Thank you.
participations.
Bye.
Thank you, Pro, again. We will see you again soon. Bye.
Hi, Luis. See you when I see you.
Hello, hello, and good to see you here online.
It's been a long time. Okay, catch up later, Luis. You take care.
And thank you very much for attending.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you to Eric for organizing. Well done, Eric.
Thank you so much. See you.
Bye.
Bye.